What's up, guys? It's Atomic, and I thought I would finally weigh in and talk about the recent developments involving the lawsuit with Friday the 13th, how it affects the franchise, and more importantly to us, how it affects the game. Now, I gotta preference this the same way I did the last time I talked about this issue. I'm not a legal expert, I'm not a lawyer, I don't really know what I'm talking about, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt, okay? I'm just going to tell you what I know based on my understanding of the situation, and I'll give you my opinion on it, alright? But again, don't take everything that I say to be truthful. I could be dead wrong. This is just my understanding of what's going on and my opinion, alright? Now, I don't want to get into too much background information. Again and again, I've talked about it at length. But the bottom line is, a couple of years ago, Victor Miller tried to get back the rights to the first film, the film that he wrote. He was able to do this because of U.S. copyright law. After 35 years, if you're the author of a work, you thought you were unfairly compensated for your work, you could get back the rights. So that's what he did. Now, to prevent this from happening, Sean Cunningham and his company, Horror Inc., they sued him. So it's been in legal limbo ever since. Well, last Friday, the 28th of September, there was finally a ruling on the issue, and as it turned out, Victor Miller won. So he got back the rights to the first film. Now, what does this all mean? What's going to happen now? What about the game? Could we still get future content? Well, let's get into it, shall we? The way I understand it, with Victor Miller winning, he is now once again the owner of everything that he created that was in the first film. So what does that all encompass? Well, for one, he would be the creator of Camp Crystal Lake. That goes to him. Same with all characters that appeared in the first film. So technically, he came up with the name Voorhees. Now, he only came up with Mrs. Voorhees, but that goes to him. I believe you guys will have to refresh me. I don't think Pamela Voorhees, the name Pamela, came about till, might have been the fourth film, it could have been the third. You guys will have to refresh my memory there. But he created the name Voorhees. He also created the character Jason Voorhees. But the Jason that he created was the little boy, right? The boy that was bullied, ended up drowning because the counselors weren't paying attention. But he created that. So any future Friday, and I should say Friday the 13th, the title, it's been pretty much well established and agreed upon. He did not come up with that title, okay? So Sean Cunningham is still the creator and can use the name Friday the 13th. But as far as the name Voorhees goes, as far as Camp Crystal Lake, it's my understanding that that goes to him. Now, the question about Jason, yes, he did create the character Jason Voorhees, but as I said, he just created the little boy Jason. So there was some debate about, well, what about the adult version of Jason, the hockey mask killer that we all know and love? Does he get him too? Most legal experts say no. The court did not make a ruling in that regard. They left that issue alone. Most people believe that Victor Miller really wouldn't have a leg to stand on. That is not his creation. This guy right here, stuffing AJ right into the stove here, he doesn't have a hockey mask. We all know him as the hockey mask killer now. But that is not Victor Miller's. Now, technically, he could still file another lawsuit and say, well, yes, it is. I created the character, Jason Voorhees. But right now, no, that's not his. Basically, all he gets Crystal Lake, he gets the name Voorhees, I would assume, and anything else that was in the first film. Cunningham still gets everything else. And I should note right now, this only applies to the United States. But basically, the first film would never be released on Blu-ray again, or, 4K, could you imagine? But that wouldn't happen unless Victor Miller, got some cash out of the deal. But everything that was established from Part 2 on, that still belongs to Cunningham and Horror Inc. So what happens now? Well, obviously, Cunningham and Horror Inc., they're going to file appeal, and most people don't think they have a leg to stand on. They lost. They don't really see an appellate court overruling this decision. So what happens as far as new films? Could we see, finally, a new Friday the 13th film? Right now, probably no, and there's a few reasons why. Again, right now, the rights are split. Cunningham could, and he has said, in releasing a statement, no, he's already going to go forward with new projects starring the hockey mask killer known as Jason. Now, I believe he would only be able to be referred to as Jason. I don't think you could really call him Jason Voorhees. He would just have to be Jason from now on. And he wouldn't have his original backstory, right? Because that belongs to Victor Miller. Like I said, Miller, he gets that Jason's backstory, little boy Jason, and like I said, the Crystal Lake name, setting, all of that. So it really is quite interesting as to what could happen. Now, I don't see this happening, but technically, in theory, you could see two competing films released. Miller, with winning this lawsuit, he doesn't own a lot, but since he owns the name, he owns the character of Mrs. Voorhees, and he owns the Crystal Lake setting, in theory, he could, sell his rights to someone and make a movie that's called, The Crystal Lake Murders. Crystal Lake is pretty synonymous with Jason, right? So, it could sell, I don't know. But it could be called The Crystal Lake Murders, with the killer being Mrs. Voorhees. Or Victor Miller, he could have his own film that is set at Camp Crystal Lake. It stars a Mrs. Voorhees as the killer, or at least a character. And who knows, maybe it's her little son, Jason, that is actually doing the killing. She keeps him in a closet, blah, blah, blah. And he's the real killer. You could change it up, but he owns all those characters, so technically he could do that. So will we see the movie, The Crystal Lake Murders? Highly unlikely. Films cost millions of dollars to make, and would you really want to invest in a film that is set at Camp Crystal Lake but doesn't have Jason Voorhees, the hockey-wearing mask killer? Probably not. At the same time, though, Cunningham, he could make his own film starring Jason, wearing his hockey mask, this adult version of Jason. The only caveat would be his name wouldn't be Jason Voorhees. It would just be Jason. And again, at the same time, what would he be doing? He couldn't be at Crystal Lake. I guess it could just be a generic camp, something like that. But again, would you want that, to confuse your audience? It's not what they're expecting. I think there would still be plenty of money to be made if you just entitled your film, Jason, and it's the Jason that we all know, wearing his hockey mask, going around killing people. People would still eat it up. But again, could you get people to invest in that? I think you could. But really what people want, we all know Jason's backstory. We know Camp Crystal Lake. Camp Crystal Lake is pretty synonymous with Jason. You think about Michael Myers, one of the first things that comes to mind is not Haddonfield. With Freddy Krueger, I guess you think of Elm Street, but you don't think of Springfield. With Jason, one of the first things that comes to mind is Crystal Lake. So really, for a new film to happen, Cunningham and Miller would have to come to some sort of agreement, some sort of settlement, or basically Miller selling his rights, now that he's got them, selling his rights to Sean Cunningham and Horror Inc. And then everything could finally proceed. And again, there's so much money to be made. We don't know how much Victor Miller wants. We know he says, he was only paid $10,000 for that original script, and this has gone on to become a billion-dollar franchise, and, he's just looking to get paid. And I totally understand that, and the law was on his side, and he's entitled to it. But again, there's so much more money to be made. I mean, you're not making any money right now with Jason. So think of the millions that could roll in, Cunningham and Miller really need to get their act together, come to some sort of agreement. Now, again, because I don't know the figure, it's easy for me to sit here and say, come on, Sean Cunningham, you got to cut this guy in. The law was on his side. You got to do it. But again, how much does this guy want? It's not an easy choice. I totally understand. Not just willing to give away everything. So we'll see what happens on that front. Now the game is a whole nother situation. We were told no more future content. On Twitter, some members of Gunn and Westkeltner and whatnot, they were a little more ambiguous about it when they said, no more future content, it's because of the lawsuit, etc. But the statement on their website is pretty clear, the end of future content. So now that this is, again, not totally resolved, like I said, there will be an appeal, even though it's not going to work. But there will be an appeal. Maybe there's going to be some sort of settlement in the near future. Again, how long would that take? Is Gunn just going to sit on their hands until something happens? They obviously don't want to do that. They want to go forward and make some money. So what does all of this mean for us, players of Friday the 13th, the game? All of us that enjoyed the game or hopeful for future content. Could there be a reversal? Could more content actually be coming after all this time? No. Sadly, the answer is no. It's not entirely out of the question. I would say there is a 5% chance, maybe even less than that Gunn changes their mind and decides to release future content. But I really do think it's a lost cause. And I'll get into why in a second. I'll talk about some hypotheticals on how it could actually occur. But before I even do that, let's talk about what future content we were going to get, or at the very least, what we were hopeful to get. Because there was quite a few things. The big one, obviously, was Uber Jason. And we know that he was, kind of complete. Things were looking good. When the single-player patch released on PC, some people were able to unlock him and basically play with a version, that wasn't finished entirely, but, it was playable. People were running around with Uber Jason, and at least with the single-player challenges. Now, he still needed work, and I'm sure they would have tweaked his abilities. They definitely had to work on his face for when he was unmasked, but he was near completion. There's also the Grendel map, a new map for the game finally. Now, based on what was leaked, what we had seen, this needed a lot more work, but again, we were hopeful for this, and it was all going to be free. Besides that, they still wanted to release paid DLC, namely a pajama pack or a nightgown, nightwear pack, whatever you want to call it. That seemed to be coming for counselors. There was also all the kill packs. Again, based on what we saw with Uber Jason and the people that had access to him, they had a kill pack planned for Uber Jason, bar none. We'll also remember that trailer that they released with the Ultimate Edition, the trailer that they released and then took down immediately. It appeared as though there was going to be a kill pack for Jason 8, or you could call it a Fire Axe kill pack. The same goes with Jason 6, or a Spear kill pack. They definitely had something planned. They were going to release more kill packs. And just because they had those two at least, it looked like it was somewhat done. They had one kill for each done. I think it's safe to assume that every Jason, or every weapon, whatever you want to call it, was going to get a kill pack. So there was plenty of stuff to look forward to. Why didn't we get it? Well, they blamed the lawsuit, right? We can't release any future content because of this lawsuit. And basically, they didn't want to get sued. Had they continued to release content, a lawyer for Victor Miller could come up and say, look, you are adding content, you are in effect continuing a story, and this story already features content that belongs to my client. You're continuing the story up. My client deserves compensation because he owns elements of, your game now. So that's why we never got it. And look, I'm not blaming Gun Media. I know there are some out there that say, this lawsuit means nothing. right from the beginning, they wanted to abandon the game. And yeah, sure, they could have released more paid DLC and made more money. But if they did, that would have just led to more bugs. More bugs cost more money to fix. So they just decided to throw in the towel, no more content, move on. And there's some validity to this. Nevertheless, I am still going to give Gunn the benefit of the doubt. Look, if you're say what you will, let's say a painter, for instance, and for whatever reason you're told, look, you just started this painting, but you're not allowed to continue it. You would never be allowed to show it publicly. You'll never be able to sell it. Would you really continue to work on it? I know some people will say, yes, it's a passion, but look, these guys are just like us. They want to make money. They want to provide for their family. Why continue to work on something if you can never release it? It's plain and simple. So I don't blame them for ending future content. Why get bogged down in a lawsuit? Now let's talk about the hypotheticals. Now that this case has been settled, some people have some hope for future content. Could it actually happen? Again, I say no. I say, basically 99% chance it couldn't happen. But how could it happen? It's always fun to speculate, so let's talk about it. Again, this was all based on U.S. copyright law. This only affected the United States. So in theory, and again, I'm just shooting from the hip here, I'm not claiming I know anything, technically, I would assume they could release content in markets that are outside of the United States, right? I mean, why not? This only affected the U.S. What would stop them from releasing, let's just say, a Jason 8 kill pack and releasing it in the European store or in the Asian store? It would be immune from the lawsuit, right? They could continue to go forward. And you're not giving people in the United States access to it. Therefore, you're free and clear, right? So why don't they do this? Well, one, if you only release it in the European store, you're definitely limiting the market of this game and how much you could sell. Also, you could still probably be subjected to a lawsuit. And it really wouldn't matter if they win or not, Let's say, for instance, a Jason 8 kill pack came out in the European store. Most of us, well, again, maybe not most of us, but I know, what would I do? Well, I'd go make a European account, and I'd go buy, the kill pack, and try to use it on my game here playing in the United States. A lawyer for Victor Miller could see that and say, you know what, these guys, yes, this doesn't affect my client specifically. This is in Europe, but they did this deliberately. They tried to avoid the copyright law. They're trying to avoid compensating our client. This is BS. And again, they could just say this. They deliberately, did this and basically winked an eye and said, yeah, go buy this on the European store. Again, it might not hold up in court, but just getting bogged down in a lawsuit is not something that Gunn wants to do. I can totally see why Gunn would not do this. Again, if you release something only in Europe or only in Asia, your market is definitely limited, and there would still be a chance that you get hit with a lawsuit. It might be frivolous, but like I said, the claim could be made, the argument could be made that this is, deliberately avoiding copyright law. They're not compensating our client, blah, blah, blah. And to get bogged down in a lawsuit, who wants to do that? So what else could they do? How else could they release content and still not be affected by the lawsuit? Well, again, I'm shooting from the hips. I'm just, theorizing here. What they could basically do is patch out everything in the game that Victor Miller owns, right? Now, that would be a lot of stuff, and I don't even know what that all would include. Obviously, the big one, you'd have to get rid of any reference to Camp Crystal Lake. So the Crystal Lake map, Crystal Lake Small in the game, they'd have to be renamed, right? Again, it could just be a generic map. They could call it the lake. That would be good, right? Some of the counselors, though, they have Crystal Lake. I think it's Bugsy and a couple of his shirts, maybe the lifeguard shirt. Again, Crystal Lake there. You'd have to get rid of all that. Anything on the loading screen that says Crystal Lake, boom, got to get rid of that. You'd have to remove any reference to the name Voorhees. Anything on the loading screen. I think there are a couple tombstones you can find in the game. Any dialogue at all. The opening cutscene of Single Player Challenge number 6. That would have to go. So it would be a lot of stuff to get rid of. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are plenty of other things that somehow Victor Miller could claim he owns now, and therefore you'd have to get rid of those. The only thing is, like I said, with this lawsuit, nothing was really decided between who owns the rights to the hockey masked killer, right? So what do you do about that? In theory, there could be another lawsuit. Most have said, like I said, that, Victor Miller would not win this. There's no way he owns the adult version of Jason. Nevertheless, he could still sue. And again, you're getting bogged down in a lawsuit. Who wants to go through all that, right? They release more content, Victor Miller goes ahead, and he sues again. With all references of things that he owns removed from the game. Again, it could just be a frivolous lawsuit, but who wants to get bogged down in that, really? Especially in the case of this game, because immediately Gun is on the hook. Now it's on them. They would be, the first party sued. Do they really want to go through that? Lawyers cost a lot. And again, even though most people would say, no, this is fine. You've removed everything from the game that Victor Miller owns. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. Again, who wants to go through all of that? And who knows? Maybe in the meantime, there's some injunction filed where they can't release anything anyway. A judge would say, nope, until this is settled. So it would just be more of a hassle, right? And again, I just don't, I understand it. Who wants to go through all that? You could put in all this time and effort, and at the end of the day, the result is the same. You're still stuck without being able to release any future content. All the hard work that you've put in is now wasted. Now, there are a few other ways that content still could be added to the game. Of course, the obvious one is that Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham come to some sort of agreement, reach a settlement, or Victor sells his rights to Sean, at a sizable profit to himself. Don't think that's going to be happening, at least not anytime soon, so I think we can pretty much throw that one out the window. So the one final way that somehow more content could be added to the game, Gun goes out on their own and reaches some sort of agreement with Victor Miller. Now, how likely is this? What do? They go to him and say, look, hey Vic, we know a lot of our fans attacked you and said horrible things about you when we announced that we couldn't release any more future content, but how about we give you a little cash and we're allowed to keep adding content to the game? Doesn't seem very likely to me anyway. Not to mention, and again, I don't know any of this, so you guys will have to tell me what the deal is, but I don't know what kind of agreement there is between Sean Cunningham and Gun Media. At one point I had heard that he gave them the rights to Friday the 13th for free. I seriously doubt that. Cunningham and Horror Inc., they're getting something out of this game. And we don't know, again, what kind of licensing agreement there is. Any kind of licensed game, it always ends, you guys will know, whether it's a Ninja Turtles game or a Marvel game. A lot of times they eventually get pulled off the PlayStation Store or, Xbox Live Marketplace, whatever the case may be, because whoever owns the rights, lost the rights. It ended. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of agreement in place. Yes, Gun Media had the rights to make this Friday the 13th a game, but for how long? We don't know. I think it would be really funny if somehow Gun Media, went to Victor Miller, they reached some sort of agreement with him, and okay, great, we can release future content, and then Cunningham turns around and pulls the plug and says, yeah, that agreement that we had, it's over now. Because again, we don't know, again, is this a licensing agreement that is on some sort of time frame? I assume there's some sort of contract in place. Was it just a handshake deal? Yeah, you guys can use it for as long as I say. Because like I said, that would be the great irony that they come to some agreement with Victor Miller, and all of a sudden Cunningham says, oh, guess what? You can't use my stuff anymore in your game. Again, we don't know. And again, another factor is, what would Victor Miller want? What's his end game? Obviously, the guy just wants to make some money. He's not going to go through the whole deal about him making this, not making, but, writing this script and only getting 10 grand for it. But again, I assume he wants some money. Either way, I don't see that happening. I don't see them reaching out to Miller. It would be nice if they did. I'd love it if they did. So basically, guys, for all the reasons that I've listed, I don't see any more content coming to the game. It's totally possible, but like I said, I'm thinking, a 5% chance this is going to happen. We are expecting, or at least I am, whether it be on their official game website or just, Wes Keltner's Twitter, I expect them to have some sort of announcement. How does this lawsuit ruling affect the future? Will it change anything? I hope they come forward. I hope they say something, and I hope they're honest about it. Look, I know they're afraid of upsetting people, and they don't want people mad at them, and it's going to hurt their company's reputation. And, this whole thing was basically a scapegoat, as a lot of people have said. A convenient excuse for them to stop adding content to the game. So I do hope they speak. I hope they are honest and transparent. And look, obviously, whenever you tell someone bad news, they're going to be mad. They're going to be upset. But in my experience, and I think most people's experience, it's always easier to accept something when you tell someone why. And with their whole announcement of future content, we never really got a why. We were told, oh, it's the lawsuit, and that's it. I hope they come out and explain everything to us. Just tell us the truth. Again, like I said, this whole thing about, it's better to hear why. Well, think about it. If you've ever, been in a relationship or something, what would you rather hear? Your girlfriend comes to you and says, I'm leaving you because you snore too much. Now, obviously, it might be stupid. You don't want to hear it, but at least you get a reason. It would be better than, you just show up one day and all her shit is packed and she's gone, no explanation, it's all over. So, whatever the reasoning is, I hope Gun Media comes out and just, lays it out. Look, we'd love to continue the game. Or, come out and say, we don't want to, we're done, we're tired of this, we don't want anything to do with this franchise anymore. If that's the truth, come out and say it. If it's not the truth, come out and tell us. Hey, look, we'd love to continue, but, it's not financially feasible at the moment. We reached out to Victor Miller, and unfortunately, we couldn't come to an agreement, and therefore, no more future content. Whatever the case may be, I don't know what else there could be, but at least if they said, look, we tried to do this, it's just not going to work, we really want it to work out, but it can't, be sincere about it. I would much rather hear that than some, this lawsuit, we can't do anything, goodbye. Thanks for buying our game, but it's all over now. So whether or not we hear that from them, your guess is as good as mine, but I really hope they have something to say, and, we'll see how it goes, again. But if you're looking for future content in this game, I'm afraid it's just not going to happen. And that's all I've got to say about this. Thank you for listening to me ramble and rant. I know this was unorganized and disjointed. It is what it is. It was, not exciting news. It's more exciting to see, well, maybe there's a chance, a possibility with this game. With movies, again, we're still in limbo. Don't get your hopes up. And quite honestly, I think there's more of a chance now of another game eventually being made, a new game, rather than any content coming to this one. But that's all for me, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I will see you all in the next video.